Now, Unit 8200, for anyone who doesn't know, is Israel's most notorious and actually largest unit of its entire military.
And I'm happy to say it's an institution that between us, I think we have journalistically terrorized over the last few years. There's been a lot of information about Unit 8200 that I've put on the account that you've put out through Mint Press. So it would make sense that somebody that emerged from this unit would be involved in a smear like this.
Yeah, most definitely. So Unit 8200 is basically the dirty tricks brigade of the Israeli military. It's really all to do with cyber warfare and online and surveillance activities. So Unit 8200, for instance, is carrying out a massive dragnet of the Palestinian population, whereby they listen to their calls, look at their emails, etc., etc. And they are building up huge profiles on millions of people to dig up dirt on them and use this as compromat to get what they want out of them. So, for example, if you are gay in Palestine and you're in the closet, Unit 8200 is known to use that information against you and turn you into an informer for them. For example, we have the testimonies of dozens of people who've come out and said that they no longer want to serve in the brigade because Unit 8200 treats all Palestinians as if they're terrorists. And they are even instructed, for example, they are taught Arabic and they're taught all the slang words for gay to listen out on all sorts of phone conversations.
Wow.
So this is what they're doing. And of course, Unit 8200 is also the base for so many of the dirty tricks online that the Israeli government has played in the last few years. Unit 8200 officers have gone on to found all sorts of surveillance companies and hacking companies, including the one that created the famous Pegasus software, which was used to spy on and surveil foreign leaders, journalists, political activists all over the world, and was very likely used in by the Saudi government in its murder of the Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. So this is the group that is coming out and saying that there are, foreign countries promoting a pro-Palestine message and boosting your reach online. That immediately should be taken with not just a grain of salt, but just like a whole bag of salt dumped on there. And it is journalistic malpractice to take that as gospel.
Yeah.
And not even informing readers that this is going on, that this is an Israeli company, just presenting it as a private analytics firm, is ludicrous, and it really stinks to high heaven.
Well, and also, Alan, we have to remember that when the campaign in Gaza began, what was the exact number again of Sayabra employees who were actually reserves in the Israeli military who went to fight in Gaza? Do you remember?
Well, Dan Brahmi actually said in a podcast interview that I was listening to that he said half of his entire staff left immediately.
Staff was about 40 people. So it's about 20 people, we can say, half of his staff.
Yeah.
So it's embedded within the Israeli military.
Yeah, half of the staff are fighting on the front lines with guns and tanks, and then the other half are fighting on the front lines with keyboards.
There you go. And actually, your really peerless research has actually found what is happening when it comes to tech companies is that there has been a massive influx of individuals who previously worked for Unit 200 into tech companies. I mean, if you could just give us a taster of some of that.
Yeah, it is extraordinary. And honestly, it wasn't very hard to find this information out. Over a series of investigations I did for Mint Press News in the past couple of years, I found that there are literally hundreds of former Unit 8200 officers and employees who now hold very important jobs in key tech companies, including dozens in Google, dozens in Amazon, dozens in Facebook, Microsoft, you name it. Any big Silicon Valley firm has got loads of these plants in there. And it wasn't very hard to find these people out. I simply went into employment databases like LinkedIn and then just wrote the word Unit 8200 Facebook and saw what came up. And when you do that, you can find just dozens upon dozens of hits of these people. And I am certain that that is a huge undercount because actually under Israeli law, it is a crime to reveal that you were formerly a member of Unit 8200.
Formally or currently?
Formerly.
Formally,
Yeah.
yeah. Wow.
So every single person who put that on their
It's
LinkedIn
breaking
is
Israeli
actually breaking the law, right?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And a recent study, a recent investigation by Electronic Intifada, Asa Winstanley, has uncovered that Asaf Kaplan, who was an individual hired by Keir Starmer for the purpose of social listening in the Labour Party, former Unit 8200, was actually active in this recent election to bring Labour to power. There's also been an interesting bit of information that's come out by an investigation by Li Fang in The Guardian, in which he went into this revamped PR commando unit, which was originally set up by the Ministry of Strategic Affairs in 2017 under Gilad Erdan. Now, initially, it was known as Killer Shlomo, and is described as something called mass consciousness activities in the United States and in Europe. And it went on to be renamed The Concert, and what it seems to be is a cluster of organizations. But now it has been relaunched under the tutelage of the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs and is titled Voices of Israel. Now, what we know is that there's 80 organizations which are part of it, and their scope is quite breathtaking because they go from organizations like the European Leadership Network, which is a lobby group focused on the EU, to other groups like, for example, the study of global anti-Semitism, the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, which had a really key role in providing the research for US Congress in their investigations into quote unquote anti-Semitism on campuses in the United States. And then what you also have is an organization called the National Black Empowerment Council, which is largely based on the African Americans within the Democrats. But then also you have a company called Cyberwell, which again employs former Israeli military personnel and has been selected as an official trusted partner for TikTok and Meta. So there's believed to be 80 organizations which are part of, in some capacity, this Voices of Israel push. Now, it really wouldn't surprise me if an organization like Cyber or others would be part of this network of what they call mass consciousness activities. And actually, early on within the genocidal campaign in Gaza, it was revealed that the Israeli government had spent something like 32 million shekels on this Voices of Israel campaign. So a huge amount of money has been distributed around the world to manipulate people's ideas. And, obviously with the Daily Telegraph article, in terms of me, it's a very tiny part, really, of that campaign. An interesting part that binds some of it together is the European Leadership Network, which, of course, has involved Joan Ryan, former Labour Party MP, key figure in the Labour Friends of Israel. The European Leadership Network actually took Jonathan Woodcock to occupied Palestine for hospitality during the war on Gaza. And Jonathan Woodcock, at the same time, had the position, number one, in the House of Lords, but number two, advising the government on political disruption and extremism. And so he released his report a month or so ago. Now, in that report, he mentions me 3 times. He says that my music, on occasion, offers apologism for terrorism, and also deals in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. But the main thrust of his report was aimed at organizations. So particularly Palestine Action was mentioned over 100 times and described in the worst possible terms. And what Jonathan Woodcock is seeking is the British government to prescribe Palestine action with a new designation, which would make it a lot harder for that organization, which has launched hundreds of actions against Israeli arms factories and arms factories arming the Israeli military throughout this war, and achieved really unprecedented victories in this country. And now it seems likely that with Keir Starmer in power, you may well see a move by the government to take those steps suggested by Jonathan Woodcock in that report. So really, this whole concept of foreign interference is very clearly happening by particular state actors, whereas in the other cases, we're told that Russia and China would somehow be so concerned about Britain, right, which in terms of landmass, in comparison to China and Russia, is a joke. I mean, it's you're talking about this tiny speck on the. I mean, of course, what Britain does externally is another question, but really, we think that China and Russia would be so concerned on such a granular scale that they would want to amplify and boost the posts of little old me, right, on Twitter to try and somehow then manipulate public opinion. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's been a massive swelling upsurge of support for Palestine and for its liberation, quite simply because people don't like genocide. But the people on the opposite side of the equation there, they cannot handle that. And so they have to find some way of delegitimizing this, because they can't simply, win an argument based on facts. And so their opposition has to be secretly backed by whoever the boogeyman of the day is, or it has to be secretly bankrolled or getting artificially boosted somehow, because it can't be the case that people are actually looking at the footage of bombing schools, bombing hospitals, of looking at women screaming as their children are put into the grave. This happening for months and months and months. They can't look at that and say, oh, actually, people are just empathetic creatures. Yeah. There has to be some sort of other explanation for this. And that's why you get all of these cock and bull stories from these second-rate analytics companies that were set up yesterday, specifically in order to do this kind of thing. And then they are drip-fed into pliant and friendly media owned by billionaires such as Rupert Murdoch. And suddenly the narrative shifts. Suddenly we're not talking about displacement.